Why does Marilyn Monroe remain one of the most recognizable faces in the world, even 6 decades after her death? Think about it. Generations have come and gone, yet her image, the blonde hair, the red lips, the dazzling smile, still define Hollywood glamour. She wasn't just an actress, she was a symbol, a dream, and at the same time, a tragedy. But here's the paradox. Behind the laughter, the diamonds, and the movie lights was Norma Jeane, a girl who grew up without stability, who carried scars from a painful childhood, and who fought constantly to be taken seriously. The world adored Marilyn, but Norma Jeane often felt invisible. This is the story of how a foster child from Los Angeles became one of the greatest icons in history. It's a story of meteoric rise, breathtaking fame, and a fall that still sparks controversy today. And along the way, we'll ask the question, what does Marilyn Monroe's life really tell us about fame, beauty, and the cost of living as a legend? Part 1. Birth and Childhood. She was born Norma Jeane Mortensen on June 1, 1926, at Los Angeles County Hospital in Los Angeles, California. Her mother was Gladys Pearl Baker. The man listed on Norma Jeane's birth certificate was Martin Edward Mortensen, but Gladys later used the surname Baker, and the identity of Norma Jeane's biological father remained uncertain for decades. In 2022, DNA testing reported by multiple news outlets confirmed that film studio employee Charles Stanley Gifford was her biological father. Within weeks of her birth, Gladys placed Norma Jeane in the care of a foster family. On June 13, 1926, Gladys brought the infant to the home of Ida and Wayne Bolander in Hawthorne, California, where Norma Jeane lived for several years. The Bolanders were her first long-term foster placement. Gladys's life was unstable. She struggled with periods of mental illness and was repeatedly hospitalized. Because of Gladys's institutionalizations and financial difficulties, Norma Jeane spent much of her childhood moving between foster homes, relatives, and short stays in institutional care. 2 women who figure repeatedly in her childhood are Grace McKee, later Grace Goddard, a close family friend who looked after Norma Jeane for years, and Anna Lower, a family acquaintance with whom Norma Jeane lived for long stretches. On September 13, 1935, when her caretakers could not continue to support her, Norma Jeane was placed at the Los Angeles Orphans' Home Society, commonly known as Hollygrove. She became a ward of the orphanage and was registered in their system. This institutional stay lasted for a period before she returned to live with Grace Goddard and Anna Lower at different times. The pattern of temporary guardianship and institutional placement continued through her early teens. She attended multiple schools in the Los Angeles area as the household arrangements changed. By the time she reached mid-adolescence, she was living with Grace Goddard and her husband, Irwin Goddard, for several years. They provided relative stability, while Grace worked at Columbia Pictures and helped Norma Jeane with schooling and practical needs. During these years, Norma Jeane also did some part-time work and household chores, typical of a fostered teenager of the era. To avoid being returned to an orphanage when the Goddards planned to move away, Norma Jeane married James or Jim Dougherty on June 19, 1942, shortly after her 16th birthday. The marriage was both a personal relationship and a practical means of escaping the foster system. Dougherty later served in the Merchant Marine during World War II. Part 2. Early Struggles and First Steps into Fame. In June 1942, at the age of 16, Norma Jeane married James Jim Dougherty, a neighbor's son who was 21. The marriage had been encouraged by Grace Goddard, her guardian at the time, to prevent Norma Jeane from returning to foster care when the Goddards moved out of California. Dougherty worked for Lockheed Aircraft, and 2 years later, he joined the Merchant Marine when the United States entered the Second World War. When Dorothy was sent overseas in 1944, Norma Jeane began working at the Radioplane Munitions Factory in Burbank, California. Her job involved spraying airplane parts with fire retardant and inspecting parachutes. In the fall of that year, her life changed dramatically when Army photographer David Conover visited the factory on assignment to document women contributing to the war effort. He noticed Norma Jeane and took several photographs of her at work. The images revealed her natural beauty and charisma, and Conover encouraged her to pursue modeling. By 1945, she had signed with the Blue Book Modeling Agency in Los Angeles. To suit the fashion standards of the time, she lightened her naturally brown hair to a golden blonde and straightened her curls. She quickly became one of the agency's most successful models. Within a year, she had appeared on the covers of more than 30 magazines, including popular publications like Pageant and Family Circle. Her growing visibility caught the attention of the film industry. In 1946, she was introduced to Ben Lyon, a casting director at 20th Century Fox. After a screen test, the studio offered her a short-term contract. It was Lyon who helped her select her stage name. He suggested the first name Marilyn, inspired by actress Marilyn Miller, and Norma Jeane chose Monroe, her mother's maiden name, as her surname. From that point forward, she was known as Marilyn Monroe. Her marriage to Jim Doherty could not withstand the changes in her life. While stationed overseas, Doherty wrote to her, but he disapproved of her ambitions to model and act. He preferred that she remain at home as a traditional wife. Marilyn, however, was determined to pursue her career. In September 1946, shortly after signing with Fox, their marriage ended in divorce. Doherty later admitted that he had little interest in Hollywood and did not want to be married to a movie star. Her first year at 20th Century Fox offered only small opportunities. She played minor roles in the 1947 films Dangerous Years and Scudda-Hoo, Scudda-Hey. Her appearances were brief, and in the latter film, most of her scenes were cut. Although her contract was not renewed after 1 year, she used the time to take acting classes, determined to prove herself. In 1948, she signed a short-term contract with Columbia Pictures. There, she received her first credited lead role in Ladies of the Chorus, where she played a showgirl named Peggy Martin. The film was a modest production and not widely successful, but it gave her valuable on-screen experience. During her time with Columbia, she was coached by Natascha Leites, a German-born acting coach employed by the studio. Natascha became a central figure in Marilyn's development, pushing her to take the craft of acting seriously. Leites taught her how to deliver dialogue with more depth, encouraged her to explore her emotions on screen, and even coached her on posture and movement. Their relationship became unusually close, with Natascha not only serving as a mentor, but also as a protective and at times possessive influence in Marilyn's personal and professional life. She relied heavily on her guidance for years, sometimes causing tension with directors who disliked Natascha's constant presence on set. After Columbia released her, Marilyn returned to modeling to support herself. Work was not always steady, and she often struggled financially during these years. In 1949, she posed nude for photographer Tom Kelly. The session produced a calendar image of her stretched on red velvet. At the time, Marilyn needed the money, and she received $50 for the shoot. The photos would resurface in 1952, when she had already become famous, sparking scandal but also reinforcing her status as a symbol of sexuality. By 1950, her persistence was beginning to pay off. She landed small but noticeable roles in more significant films. In The Asphalt Jungle, directed by John Huston, she played the mistress of a criminal. And in All About Eve, she had a small role as an aspiring actress. These brief appearances caught the attention of critics and audiences. More importantly, they showed studio executives that she had potential beyond simple background roles. At this point, Marilyn Monroe was no longer Norma Jeane Doherty, the factory worker and foster child. She had fully stepped into the orbit of Hollywood, balancing small film roles, modeling assignments, and constant lessons to improve her craft. The road ahead was uncertain, but her transformation into a star was already underway. Part 3. Rise to Stardom. Marilyn Monroe's rise to fame began with two key supporting roles that showcased her potential as more than just a pretty face. In 1950, director John Huston cast her in The Asphalt Jungle, a gritty crime film that is now considered a classic of film noir. Marilyn played Angela Finley, the young mistress of a corrupt lawyer. Although her role was small, her performance drew critical attention. Reviewers noted how she commanded the screen in her few scenes, displaying a mix of innocence and sensuality that became a hallmark of her style. This was the first time audiences and critics began to take real notice of her. That same year, she appeared in another landmark film, Joseph L. Mankiewicz's All About Eve. In this sharp drama about the ruthless world of theater, Marilyn played Miss Caswell, a young and somewhat naive actress described as a graduate of the Copacabana School of Dramatic Arts. Her part was small but memorable, delivering witty lines with charm while holding her own alongside acting heavyweights like Bette Davis, who played the iconic Margot Channing. For an actress still trying to find her footing in Hollywood, sharing the screen with legends such as Davis gave Marilyn's career a significant boost. By the end of 1950, Monroe's name was beginning to circulate in Hollywood as an up-and-coming actress. While these roles were brief, they proved she could make an impression in serious films. They also positioned her in the eyes of critics and studios as someone who could play not only comedic or decorative roles, but also bring depth and intrigue to a character. These two appearances became the springboard for her transformation from struggling actress into a rising star. The momentum Marilyn gained from her roles in The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve carried her into the early 1950s. But what truly propelled her into the spotlight was not only her work on screen, but also her growing reputation as a sex symbol. Studios quickly recognized the magnetic combination of innocence and allure that Marilyn projected. Photographers loved her, and magazines began to feature her more frequently, using her image to capture the glamour of post-war America. Yet one event more than any other cemented her image. In late 1952, just as her career was gaining traction, journalists discovered that she had posed nude for a calendar back in 1949, when she was struggling financially and had needed money for rent and groceries. The photos, taken by photographer Tom Kelly, resurfaced at a time when Marilyn's career was beginning to bloom. Studio executives feared a scandal that could end her career before it even began. Instead of denying the story, Marilyn chose honesty. She admitted openly that she had posed for the photos, explaining simply, "I was broke and needed the money." This unexpected candor not only diffused the scandal, but also won her sympathy from the public. Rather than damaging her career, the revelation made her more relatable and even added to her allure. People admired her vulnerability and her refusal to hide her past. Soon after, in 1953, those very images appeared in the very first issue of Playboy magazine. Hugh Hefner purchased the rights to the calendar shots, and Marilyn Monroe became the cover star of the debut issue. Ironically, the nude photographs that could have ruined her career instead helped transform her into a cultural icon of sexuality. By the mid-1950s, Marilyn was no longer just an actress trying to break through. She had become the embodiment of Hollywood glamour and sensuality. Every studio understood her box office draw, and the public's fascination with her only grew. She was the face of a new era, one where sexuality was becoming more openly discussed in American culture, and Marilyn stood at the center of that transformation. With her image as a sex symbol firmly established, Marilyn Monroe quickly moved into some of the most defining roles of her career. In 1953, she starred in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, opposite Jane Russell. The film not only showcased her comedic timing, but also gave the world one of her most famous musical numbers, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. Dressed in a striking pink gown and surrounded by tuxedo dancers, Marilyn delivered a performance that cemented her persona as the playful, glamorous blonde bombshell. That single scene would go on to inspire countless tributes in popular culture, from Madonna's Material Girl to modern fashion shoots. That same year, she appeared in How to Marry a Millionaire, alongside Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall. The film was one of the first ever shot in CinemaScope, and its widescreen format highlighted Marilyn's beauty in a way audiences had never seen before. Her role as the sweet but naive model who dreams of marrying into wealth again played to her strengths, and audiences adored her. The film was a commercial success, solidifying her status as a bankable star. By 1954, she was at the absolute peak of her fame. That year, she starred in The 7-Year Itch, directed by Billy Wilder. The movie gave the world one of the most iconic images in cinema history. Marilyn standing over a New York City subway grate, her white dress billowing up around her as a train passed below. Though the moment was staged for the cameras, the image captured something electric about Marilyn. Playful, flirtatious, and unforgettable. It became the single most enduring photograph of her career and a symbol of her cultural impact. Through these films, Marilyn was no longer just a popular actress. She was Hollywood's golden face, a global sensation. Her box office success rivaled any other star of the 1950s, and her image was plastered on posters, magazines, and advertisements around the world. Yet even as she embodied the fantasy of Hollywood glamour, behind the scenes, she was beginning to feel the weight of being typecast as the dumb blonde. The roles made her famous, but they also trapped her in a persona that she would later struggle to break free from. As Marilyn Monroe's fame skyrocketed, the image that Hollywood built around her became both her greatest strength and her deepest frustration. Studios, especially 20th Century Fox, leaned heavily into marketing her as the ultimate blonde bombshell. This persona was shaped not just by her films, but by how she was promoted in magazines, publicity stunts, and interviews. She was often asked to play characters who were beautiful but naive, flirtatious but not intellectual, roles that reinforced the stereotype of the dumb blonde. Directors and studio executives believed this was what audiences wanted, and for a time they were right. Movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The 7-Year Itch made millions at the box office, in part because of the way they showcased her in this light. But the more she played these characters, the harder it became for anyone in Hollywood or beyond to convince her that she was capable of serious, dramatic work. Privately, this image weighed on her. Marilyn knew she was far more than the cartoonish roles she was handed. She read voraciously, studied acting with intensity, and wanted to be recognized for her talent as much as her beauty. But in public, she had to maintain the facade of the ever-smiling, flirtatious star. It was a dual life, the glamorous figure adored by millions, and the insecure woman behind the scenes, often racked with doubt, struggling with anxiety, and yearning to be taken seriously. This tension became a defining feature of her life. Hollywood had crafted an icon, a global sex symbol whose image could sell tickets, magazines, and fantasies. But that image often left little room for the real Marilyn Monroe to breathe. And as her fame grew, the gap between the public Marilyn and the private Marilyn widened, creating a struggle that would follow her until the very end. Part 4. Stardom and Struggles. As Marilyn Monroe became one of the most famous women in the world, the very image that made her a star began to feel like a prison. By the mid-1950s, she was frustrated with being typecast in light comedies and musical roles that relied solely on her beauty. She wanted to prove that she was more than the stereotype of the dumb blonde that Hollywood executives insisted on selling to audiences. In 1954, she made headlines when she married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. Their marriage, however, was troubled from the start. DiMaggio struggled with her fame and disliked the way she was displayed as a sex symbol for the world. One of the defining moments of their tension came when she filmed The 7-Year Itch. In the famous scene where Marilyn stands over a subway grate as her white dress billows upward, photographers and onlookers crowded the set. The publicity was electric, but DiMaggio was furious, seeing it as public humiliation. Their arguments grew worse, and within just 9 months, the marriage ended in divorce. At the same time, her professional life was also turbulent. Monroe became increasingly frustrated with 20th Century Fox, the studio that controlled her contracts. She felt underpaid compared to her male co-stars, despite her films generating massive profits. In 1954, she boldly walked out on the studio, moving to New York to study at the Actors Studio with famed teacher Lee Strasberg. This was a turning point. At the Actors Studio, she immersed herself in method acting, determined to reshape her career and be recognized as a serious actress. Her time in New York also marked the beginning of a shift in her image. She founded her own company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, in 1955, a rare move for a woman at the time. Through it, she sought more control over the roles she played and the direction of her career. The press mocked her decision at first, with many doubting her ability to manage her own production company. But Marilyn persisted, driven by her desire to be respected not just as a glamorous star, but as an actress with depth and vision. Still, the struggle between her public persona and her private ambitions remained constant. Every time she tried to step into more serious roles, Hollywood and the public pulled her back toward the image of the dazzling, carefree blonde. This conflict between the icon and the woman would define not only her career, but her personal battles in the years to come. As Marilyn reshaped her career, she began taking on more challenging roles. In 1956, she starred in Bus Stop, playing a small-town singer with dreams of stardom. Critics were impressed by her performance, praising her ability to bring vulnerability and depth to the role. It was one of the first signs that she was breaking away from the dumb blonde stereotype. That same year, she married playwright Arthur Miller, one of America's most respected literary figures. Their marriage was seen by many as a surprising union, the glamorous Hollywood star and the serious intellectual. To Marilyn, Miller represented stability and respectability, but their relationship was far from easy. She wanted love and emotional security, while Miller often struggled with the weight of her fame and the constant media attention. Marilyn's career continued to reach new heights with films like The Prince and the Showgirl in 1957, where she starred opposite Laurence Olivier. While the production was difficult, Olivier found her unprofessional and often impatient. Monroe delivered a performance that once again proved her ability to go beyond her image. Her work with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio continued to shape her acting style, though it also made her more self-critical and insecure about her talent. In 1959, Marilyn delivered one of the greatest performances of her career in Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder. The film, co-starring Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, was a massive success and has since been regarded as one of the best comedies ever made. Monroe's role as the charming and troubled sugarcane was iconic, balancing her comedic timing with a sense of sadness that mirrored her real life. Yet even this triumph came with behind-the-scenes difficulties. Her chronic lateness, struggles with lines, and bouts of insecurity caused tension on set. Despite the chaos, her performance shone, and she won a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy. Behind the glamour, however, Monroe's personal struggles were intensifying. She faced miscarriages during her marriage with Miller, fueling her sense of instability. Her dependence on barbiturates and alcohol began to grow, often as a way to cope with her insomnia and anxiety. What the public saw was a dazzling star at the height of her career, but privately, Marilyn was increasingly vulnerable, trapped between the demands of Hollywood, her own insecurities, and the pressures of her personal life. By the early 1960s, Marilyn Monroe's career and personal life were both on shaky ground. Her marriage to Arthur Miller, once celebrated as the union of beauty and intellect, had begun to collapse. Miller grew frustrated with Marilyn's emotional fragility and her constant need for reassurance. Marilyn, in turn, felt betrayed when Miller wrote unflattering characters that seemed inspired by her struggles. Their marriage ended in divorce in January 1961. Her health was also deteriorating. Years of insomnia, anxiety, and reliance on barbiturates had taken a toll. She was often hospitalized for exhaustion and depression. At the same time, she faced difficulties in Hollywood. In 1960, she starred in The Misfits, a film written by Miller and directed by John Huston. Though the movie is now remembered as a poignant drama, its production was plagued by problems. Marilyn's dependence on medication led to delays, and tensions ran high on set. It would be her last completed film. After The Misfits, Marilyn's public appearances became rarer. She was cast in Something's Got to Give in 1962, but the production quickly fell apart. She missed days of filming due to illness and her strained mental state, leading the studio to fire her. It was a devastating blow to her career. Plans were underway to rehire her after public backlash, but Marilyn would not live to see the project through. By this time, her private life was drawing as much attention as her films. Rumors swirled about affairs with powerful men, including President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. These stories added to her mystique, painting her as both glamorous and tragic. She was admired around the world, but increasingly isolated, surrounded by people who wanted something from her, yet unable to find the stability she longed for. Marilyn Monroe was still only in her mid-30s, yet the pressures of fame, the breakdown of her marriage, her health struggles, and the relentless demands of Hollywood left her deeply fragile. On the surface, she was still the world's most famous sex symbol, but underneath, her life was unraveling. Part 5. Decline and Death. By the summer of 1962, Marilyn Monroe's life seemed caught between glamour and collapse. On the one hand, she was still a global icon, her image appearing in magazines and her name lighting up headlines. On the other hand, she was battling crippling insomnia, depression, and a growing dependence on barbiturates and alcohol. She had been dismissed from Something's Gotta Give, though negotiations to bring her back were underway. Her professional life was fragile, but it was her private life that would soon become the center of one of the biggest mysteries in Hollywood history. The rumors of her involvement with President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, had only grown louder after her sultry "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" performance in May 1962. To some, it seemed like a public acknowledgement of a secret relationship. Speculation spread that she had been romantically involved with John and later with Robert, and that she became entangled in political affairs far beyond the Hollywood stage. On the morning of August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead at her home in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. The official finding by the Los Angeles County coroner was that the cause of death was an acute barbiturate overdose and that the death was probably a suicide. The basic medical facts reported at the time were that she had lethal levels of sedatives in her system and that she was discovered in her bedroom. Those are the conclusions that remain the legal record. Almost immediately, however, inconsistencies and unanswered questions began to multiply. The accounts about who found her and how events unfolded differ in important details. A longtime housekeeper named Eunice Murray claimed she found Marilyn in the early morning and called the psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson. Dr. Greenson was Marilyn's physician and confidant in her final years. Other accounts placed Dr. Greenson at the house earlier in the night. The exact sequence of phone calls, who first entered the bedroom, and the timing of emergency services became contested points in later retellings. The autopsy confirmed high concentrations of barbiturates and sedative hypnotics in her blood. Different reports use different drug names, but the important point is that the level of central nervous system depressants was judged fatal. Some medical experts and commentators have later argued that the pattern of drugs could be consistent with an accidental overdose combined with long-term use. Others say the concentrations were so high that deliberate ingestion is the more plausible explanation. The coroner concluded probable suicide based on the toxicology and the circumstances. The medical facts alone did not stop the rumors. Her public fame, her known fragility, her ties to powerful men and to controversial figures created fertile ground for conspiracy theories. The most persistent set of theories involved the Kennedys. Reports that Marilyn had been romantically linked to President John F. Kennedy and possibly to his brother Robert only fueled speculation that her death might have involved political cover-up. Some theorists allege that she knew secrets that made her dangerous to certain people. Those are allegations. No definitive evidence tying the Kennedys to her death has ever been produced. The FBI conducted inquiries and later released files that show an interest in the matter, but no proof of foul play. Other theories pointed toward organized crime. Marilyn had social ties, direct and indirect, to figures who operated near the boundary of Hollywood and the mob. Some writers speculated that mafia figures could have been involved in a plot to silence her or to settle scores linked to the Kennedys. Again, those remain allegations based on circumstantial connections, not on a proven chain of events. The official investigations and later reviews did not, in the end, provide a smoking gun. The Los Angeles Police Department closed the case with the coroner's finding. The FBI files include interviews and internal notes, but nothing that overturns the conclusion of abuse of sedatives. Historians and investigative journalists who later returned to the case found contradictions in witness statements, missing or unclear records, and disputed timelines. Some of those inconsistencies make the case look suspicious. At the same time, none of the alternative theories has produced conclusive forensic proof that proves homicide. Several factors explain why the case remains so fertile for speculation. Marilyn was a public figure tied to powerful people. Her private life involved prescription medications, psychiatric care, and periods of acute emotional distress. The official record has gaps. Memories change. Witness statements conflict. In the absence of a neat, publicly accepted narrative, rumor fills the space. The verdict for most official bodies remains the same. The death was caused by a toxic level of barbiturates and sedative drugs and was judged a probable suicide. That ruling stands alongside decades of investigation and intense public curiosity. Beyond official rulings, what persists is a larger cultural question. Her death did not simply end a life, it intensified the mythology around Marilyn Monroe. The uncertainties and the rumors have become part of the legend. If you weigh the evidence strictly, the most defensible conclusion is that she died from an overdose of sedative drugs, with suicide judged the most likely explanation by the coroner. If you weigh the cultural context and the unresolved discrepancies, you can see why other explanations took hold and why the story has not died. Both facts are part of the historical record. The medical findings provide the legal answer. The gaps in testimony and oddities in the timeline explain why the public has continued to ask questions for decades.
Marilyn Monroe's life was a story of dazzling highs and devastating lows.
Born as Norma Jeane Mortensen in 1926, she rose from foster homes and hardship to become the most recognizable woman in the world. She reinvented herself, mastering the art of allure and turning her vulnerabilities into the very qualities that made her unforgettable. Yet the very system that built her up also tore her down. Hollywood typecast her, the media scrutinized her, and those closest to her often failed to see the fragile person behind the image. Her death at only 36 left the world shocked, and the mystery surrounding it has kept her legend alive for more than 60 years. She remains an icon, not just because of her beauty or her fame, but because her story reflects the human cost of ambition, desire, and fame itself. Marilyn Monroe was not simply a symbol. She was a woman who dreamed of love, respect, and recognition, and whose life continues to echo as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. If you've stayed with us this far, thank you for listening to the story of Marilyn Monroe's extraordinary life. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about her story? Was she more victim of her circumstances or master of her own legend? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And for fun, give us your hottest take. If Marilyn were alive today, do you think she'd still be Hollywood's brightest star? Or would the modern media have treated her differently? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into history's most fascinating lives, and share this with someone who still has Marilyn's poster on their wall. Because icons like her deserve to be remembered, discussed, and understood.